Not that long ago, someone asked me, what is retirement like for a single person? Are there other planning challenges or different hurdles as compared to a couple? I thought the best way to answer that question would be to look at an example of someone entering retirement so we could see the similarities and different considerations a single person might make. The other reason this topic is so important is because quite often it can be a sensitive one. Now, some will certainly relish getting to live alone, but for others, this could be an unwelcome, undesired, or unexpected season of their lives. So let's work through an example and discuss concerns an individual might face when entering retirement. Hey everybody, if you're new to my channel, my name is Crossland of Subtle Crossland Wealth Advisors. I help folks build more tax-efficient retirements. So let's get into it. Now, a quick forward on the example. The probability of any level of success depends on many different factors. Not just where you choose to live, but also a number of personal factors. I just can't cover all of them in a single example, but it does highlight the need for folks to run their own analysis. And even if you're married, this can still be a useful review. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, among adults 15 or older widowed in the preceding 12 months, 71% of men and 69% of women were 65 or older, even though this group comprises only 19% of all people ages 15 or older. There are other sources that will cite the U.S. Census Bureau in claiming that the average age of widowhood is 59, but I could not find a definitive report from the U.S. Bureau claiming that number. But the bottom line is that there are going to be quite a few people that are going to end up facing retirement alone, and there's a real possibility for some it could be a lot sooner than they ever would have expected. So let's dive into this example and discuss what we see. So here we get to meet Sam. Sam is 62. Sam is looking to retire. And as we can see, Sam is single. So the big question for Sam is, number one, can I retire? And number two, as an individual, what are some of the things that I need to be aware of so that I don't run into any major issues when it comes to my retirement and basically taking care of myself? So let's look a little bit more at Sam's situation. If we come over and take a look at the goals, pretty straightforward. Let's retire now if we can. Sam is looking to spend $5,000 per month. There is some budget baked into that for travel. Now, I will say that one of the considerations for an individual versus a couple is oftentimes you will have a little bit lower expense, or you will have a smaller budget for one person as opposed to two. And this can especially be the case if you have a scenario where you are debt-free entering retirement. So we don't see that on this particular page, but it's another important note to make here is Sam is basically entering retirement as a debt-free individual. Now, if you haven't seen my recent video looking at average expenses and income for retirees, I'll put a link to that. You can check that out. But that's really going to kind of break down the basis for financial planning from the retirement standpoint as far as what type of asset base might somebody need. How do you close the gap between income and expenses to have a financially successful retirement? Now, regardless of if you're married or if you are single, there is a high probability that you may need some form of long-term care or advanced medical care as you get older. And I've put this stat up in prior videos, and this comes from the longtermcare.gov website. But the stat that I like to reference from them is that someone turning age 65 today has almost a 70% chance of needing some type of long-term care services and support in their remaining years. Do you have to include long-term care in the review of your retirement? Well, no, you don't have to do that. But if you're trying to have a conservative viewpoint or something that says, can I cover all of the possible basis that might create a situation where I am not financially successful, you have to include long-term care in some capacity. If you don't have long-term care insurance, guess what? You are self-insuring that need. So I like to always include it just as another conservative view of whether or not someone is going to be financially successful, making it all the way through retirement. The other goal that's not listed here, but I'll say is we're also looking at planning this retirement to age 90. So that's going to be the life expectancy that we're looking at. If we take a look at the asset base for Sam, now in Sam's case, they want to age into their home, so they're not looking to necessarily have to sell or downsize the home. And the other thing that they don't want to have to do is use the home as any sort of a fail-safe if other assets run out. Obviously, they'll do that as a last resort, but the whole point of this review is to see if the combination of Social Security and additional assets that are invested or set aside are going to be enough to create this successful retirement. So here we can see Sam has in the bank right now $90,000. Sam's IRA is $660,000, and then there's a brokerage account of $250,000. And so what this does is it creates an asset base or investable asset base of essentially $1 million. The home is worth $450,000, and we're getting a total net worth at this point of $1.45 million. And so now we can frame this up pretty well. Again, Sam's 62, trying to retire, single. And so now we have a wider view of what Sam wants to do and the assets that Sam is going to have to work with. So I've jumped us over here to the first place that I want to take a look at and discuss, and that is Social Security. There are a million opinions. There's a million videos that you can watch that discuss the benefits of taking it at 62, the benefits of taking it at 70, and then every age in between. Why you would do that, why you would not. But what are the considerations that an individual might have to make as compared to, let's say, a couple? Well, number one, there is an optimal view of Social Security in a vacuum. And oftentimes that optimal view is based completely on what is the biggest or most that you will get in terms of your lifetime payout. Now, a big consideration for a couple is survivorship. And so oftentimes you will hear or see in videos where they discuss delaying Social Security. You've probably heard me say this if you watched other videos as well. Delaying Social Security till 70 for the higher paying spouse has a consideration towards the survivorship. And this is important on its own just because we discussed just very briefly on widow statistics, and there are other resources that can discuss some of the difficulties that widows and widowers will face, both emotionally and financially. But in a couple situation, it can be very important for the spouse that earns more to delay till 70 for the sake of survivorship. Now, if you're an individual, I think that delaying till 70 can still have merit when you take a look at it from the big picture, and we'll do that. But now you don't have the exact same consideration towards survivorship unless you plan to remarry or if you're already on the path to getting remarried. So let's take a look at just some of the basic details on the Social Security to begin with. We're saying that Sam is going to have a full retirement age, or 67, benefit amount of $2,400 per month. And this is going to be based on the work that they've done. This is the number that they've gotten off of their Social Security benefit statement. So now that we come back, we're looking at what is, quote unquote, optimal. What are the differences? So right now we're looking at optimal strategy versus current strategy. Well, current strategy is take it at 67 or full retirement age, not early, not late. We see that in a vacuum, Sam is going to have $127,800 more if they do the optimal strategy. And we can see that right down here. That optimal strategy is basically saying, again, in a vacuum, wait till 70. If we want to look at the break-even point for this as well, we can see that the break-even point between taking it at 67 versus 70 is age 80. So if Sam lives past 80, that means that their lifetime payout amount is going to be higher by delaying until 70. Now, alternatively, we could take a look at Sam taking it at 62. So basically as early as possible. So a lot of folks in a single situation, I think, feel a bigger concern about having income now. There's not a situation where maybe one of the other spouse could go back to work if there was kind of that black swan event. So the temptation to turn Social Security on at 62 if you are single is very high compared to if you're in a married situation. But here we can see that if Sam was to take Social Security as early as possible, 62, versus the optimal or delaying until 70, there's a near $337,000 higher payout by delaying. If we look at break even on this one, we see that if Sam is debating, I should take it to 62 versus 70, by delaying until 70, the break even point would be age 78. And one more just for fun that we'll take a look at is we'll look at that full retirement age comparison, at least delaying until 67. Sam's looking at about $209,000 more in their lifetime versus early as possible, age 62, and then break even point on that, age 76. So which of these you choose is going to be based on the emotional factors. Do you feel like you can survive waiting until 67 or until 70 using those assets that you have set aside to do that, in addition to the specific financial ability of your situation? Now, jumping over here to the analysis of the Monte Carlo, we can see that right out of the gate, Sam has a 71% probability of success. We see a median value over here of about $614,000 of the assets at the end of life expectancy, age 90. So if I were in Sam's shoes and I saw a 71% probability of success, what that would tell me is that I have a pretty strong probability that I will not run out of money, but I do have a non-negligible chance that I may have to make some type of adjustment. Now, as far as the spending assumption goes, we discussed it being $5,000 a month in Sam's situation, but I want to highlight that we're also going to use a dynamic spending approach called floor and ceiling. This is something that I like to look at. I believe this is probably a bit more in line with what human behavior is. And what floor and ceiling says is that you have a target spending amount that you're going to have on a monthly or annual basis. You'll adjust that for inflation over time, but you're willing to spend a little bit more money if markets have been good in the prior year. But if markets are bad, you're going to be willing to pull back that spending and reduce that. So if you have that dynamic approach to your spending, that can actually help improve the probability of success. So it brought us over here to take a look at something that I think is applicable for married individuals, certainly, but on the individual front, we're looking at withdrawal rates. And what the withdrawal rates show us is that if Sam was to have that approach to Social Security of delaying till 67, or at least, full retirement age, they would have a higher withdrawal rate in these first few years. After Social Security kicks in, we can see that the withdrawal rate comes down and it stays down up until we see those last 2 years. This is going to be where the long-term care would come in and, money would need to come out at a much higher level for those last 2 years. Something else to come look at, we'll take a look at the investable assets. We can see that before we take Social Security, they stay pretty even. I think the assumption here is hopefully the investments can grow a little bit while Sam is taking some of those out until Social Security comes in to help the burden. Then when it does, we see an increasing level to the assets over time. And then we see at the end here a drop off for that long-term care. We don't really see a situation from this view of a depletion of asset. Somebody might look at this and say, well, how are you getting a 71%? Well, let's take a look and see why that occurs. So here we can see the projection of these assets and their confidence levels over time. So a couple interesting things to note is that the median value never dips to zero. And it's really not until the end that we see it really kind of dip below $1 million, and that's, that end of life and long-term care. But note how wide the confidence levels get here between, the highest at 95% and the lowest down at 5%. For somebody that's retiring and has, 100% likelihood of success or just an extraordinarily high level of success, you would expect to see very little or a much tighter dispersion. When you see a wider dispersion, that means that some of those scenarios that it's running do come with a chance of crashing into or hitting zero, before that end of life. So back over here, we'll come and we'll talk about, well, what are some things that could help with the first thing that Sam was worried about, which is having a successful retirement financially. So what could Sam do to improve the probability of success, maybe improve the outcome, if you will, on the Monte Carlo, as well as that median value or, show a higher value in this analysis? Well, let's take a look. And the first thing I want to look at is just the optimal scenario for Social Security. What happens? Let's see if this is even worth entertaining. Here we can see that if Sam was to delay Social Security from 67 until 70, we would have a little bit of an increase in the probability of success. And here we are up to 76%. So I don't know if the Social Security decision is quite as critical as if maybe this had jumped it from 71%, like 95%. All right, delaying until 70 would be a slam dunk decision. But in this case, I don't know if this is enough for somebody to say, well, yes, let me go ahead and delay all the way to 70 just on the merits of what that does to my Monte Carlo, because this is still a very similar view. Our comparison is still very similar. I mean, look at taking Social Security at 67, which is the blue, versus taking Social Security at 70, which is the green. Look at that difference. But that 3 years where you're not taking it, you are aging, you do feel like, well, I'm really dipping into those investments more than I'm comfortable with. That may drive somebody to take it at 67. In this instance, that may be a better decision from a quality of life aspect. And just for fun, something that we should look at is just early as possible. So what happens if somebody says, well, let me just take it at 62? This looks a little bit more of an appreciable change. Delaying from 67 to 70, not a huge thing, but going from 67 to 62 has actually had a greater reduction in the probability of success and has almost cut that median value on the projection of the Monte Carlo in half. Looking at the confidence on this, we see that we are crashing to zero on the left tail risk or, kind of those worst case scenarios much sooner. Thankfully, our median line doesn't hit zero at any point. But again, it does cut almost in half. We take a look at the comparison on the assets here. we see that the taking it at 67 has a better outcome. And this is slightly more pronounced than it was when we looked at 67 to 70. So 62 might make you feel better at 62, but how might you feel later in life, later on in those golden years when you're upper 70s through your 80s? How are you going to feel about your asset base or your asset situation if it's dwindling a little bit quicker because of the effects of inflation and the inability of a permanently lowered Social Security meeting more of those needs more often? These are the things that you are going to have to address, whether you are single or married. But for, again, a single individual, things definitely feel amplified. If we look at one of the key stat here, let's look at withdrawal rate. So early on, withdrawal rate is manageable. As we see up in the 70s, withdrawal rate does increase. We see it increasing all the way up past 6.5% towards the end. And then, of course, long-term care comes in. So you have to ask yourself, are those 5 extra years of Social Security, do those make me feel better? Do those give me a better quality of life? Do those give me a better financial outcome compared to waiting till 67 or waiting until 70? And so this one's a little bit more precarious as far as the decision that you would make. So what else do we see that we could affect? Well, a big one is going to be income, or it's going to be expense. Sam does not want to have an extra job. Sam does not want to rent out a room. Sam does not have, oil rights or mineral rights anywhere, no rents or royalties. And Sam really does not want to have to do a reverse mortgage or access equity in the home unless they absolutely have to. But what if Sam was willing to adjust spending? So a small change. Let's see what type of effect that would have. So if Sam said, instead of targeting $5,000, let me target $4,500 per month. So that's a basic reduction of $6,000 in a year, and then still applying that mindset of dynamic spending with the floor and ceiling. Now we see a much bigger effect than taking Social Security early or late. And this might be very doable. Sam might say, you know what? I am debt free. I already have such a wide discretionary budget. I can pull back $500 a month. So this small change could have a huge effect. And to push that even further, just for the sake of it, because some of you might look at this and say, $4,500 a month. What are they going on vacations every month here? $4,000. That's what I would spend. Okay, well, obviously a further reduction in expense would correspond with a higher probability of success, a higher result on the Monte Carlo. All the while, we still have our assumptions for additional health and our assumptions for additional long-term care. So that becomes a big question for an individual. Are you willing to cut your budget, or do you want to have to consider the last resorts as far as income? So let's say that Sam is perfectly comfortable at $4,000 per month. They feel like, hey, I'm still going to be able to do my vacations. I'm going to do everything that I want to do. Great, I can live with that. And remember, if there are good years, that spending can increase. That's baked in with the floor and ceiling spending approach. What are any other considerations that an individual may have versus a couple? Well, let's take a look at the tax end. Are there any considerations or anything that might be different? And one of the things that I really like to look at is tax. Tax is a big deal when it comes to your retirement. If you're unaware of it, you could accidentally end up overpaying. If you're just unaware of tax avoidance strategies, you need to get educated on that. I have other videos that discuss the importance or need for retirees to tax plans. So if you want to check that video out, feel free. But is there anything else here that might be important to an individual? Well, on the tax end, what we could try to figure out or determine, since Sam does have pre-tax assets, is the tax consideration. And the big reason being is the more you pay in tax, the less you keep, the less that gets to stick around and actually compound and work towards better returns in the long term. So what we're looking at here is the difference in doing nothing from a tax standpoint, just paying the bills as they come, running no tax avoidance strategies or doing anything from a tax avoidance perspective, versus, well, what if we were to strategically use the pre-tax account? Sam's 62. We're at a great age where we can consider our situation, especially if we don't have Social Security or some of these other income sources. Well, let's at least take a look at this. Here we're going to say that we're just doing kind of the standard thing. We're doing nothing. Pay the bills as they come versus looking at doing Roth conversion or strategic use of the IRA through the 22 and 25% bracket. The tax brackets for a single filer are much narrower. They're squeezed down more than it is for a married couple. So a married couple may have fairly similar income to a single individual, but by virtue of having a married filing jointly situation, they suddenly have wider marginal brackets to work with. And so they could effectively have less tax liability, and that means their investments can stick around longer. Their investments can be more available for them. So as an individual, to me, this is critical to try to reduce your lifetime tax bill so that you are providing more for yourself. So let's take a look at the comparables. And some people may care about having more tax-free than others. This can be a big deal if you are looking at leaving an inheritance to an individual. But what you'd want to look at is the potential for ending portfolio value. That can be an indication of how assets are building over time. And then think about those later years when you're using long-term care. There can be deductions for long-term care costs, but imagine being able to have assets in a Roth IRA provide what you need without having the worry of what to do from a tax standpoint. Something else to take a look at with this as well, we could take a look at how the withdrawals shape up. This light blue is the tax-free. This is your Roth. You pulling out a Roth. Look at this. We're done pulling out of IRAs or pre-tax way over here, age 71, age 72. Over here, you're taking it out forever. And we don't know what tax rates are going to look like in the future. So if you were taking out, let's say $95,000 when you're 85, and this is mainly or mostly coming out of an IRA account, what are those taxes going to look like? You and I don't know. It could be 22%, it could be 25%, it could be higher, it could be lower. But you're talking about looking ahead about 25 years. And so what do you think tax rates are going to look like? Something else to look at with this as well, again, the account balance can be something that is useful to look at, very similar. So I don't know if you'd make the decision on that basis just by itself. This one's pretty fun. Do you want to pay required minimums and have to deal with that? Or do you want to have the possibility as an individual of no required minimums? It's my money. I'll take it out when I want. I'll do the tax avoidance up front. I'll do the right strategies up front. That is a real possibility for Sam. Last one to look at, and this is the one that matters the most. What is the amount in tax you may have to pay? Always take this with a grain of salt. This is not going to be dogma for everybody. Every situation has to be assessed, and this is a year-by-year decision. But is running that tax avoidance strategy going to help? Well, at least in the projection, you tell me, would you rather pay $223,000 in projected federal tax over your lifetime or $342,000? I'll take this one over here, $223 in Sam's situation. So that difference matters. That tax is in Sam's pocket. That tax that Sam is not paying is now another trip. It's another life event need. It's another fill in the blank. And so, yes, married couples and individuals are going to have to care about this. But again, that quality of life, that emotional feeling, that emotional state that you might feel as an individual versus a couple may have a big impact on you with this. So what have we kind of learned in taking a look at this? Well, I think we've learned that there's not a huge difference from a couple versus an individual when it comes to the financial specifics. Nobody likes running out of money. Nobody wants to worry about running out of money. Nobody wants to have a hard time in retirement. That's all the same. But decision-making can absolutely be affected by emotions. They can be affected by your situation. They can be affected by what life has given you. And so some of these things that an individual maybe have a heightened sensitivity to are going to relate to decisions on when to take Social Security, early versus late, decisions on how much they can actually spend. Are they in a situation where maybe they feel like life's too short, I need to enjoy this more? Or maybe they're in a situation where they're on their own and maybe their folks live to be 95 or 100 years old and suddenly longevity is a concern. Who's going to take care of them if they are in a situation where they need long-term care, that spouse is not there, that partner's not there, maybe that family support's not there? What about the tax end? I have much lower brackets as an individual. Maybe I'm concerned about more of my money going out and how that's going to affect my bottom line. We can see that there are a number of different variables that need to be considered. The bottom line for me is that it's important for everyone to have a look and assess their own situation. But in the conversation on the individual standpoint, I think it's really important to combine the ability in your financial situation to handle retirement with the emotional or the willing end to make some of these tough decisions. And if you don't know how to do that, if this is something that you just don't know or understand, or if you feel like you're alone on an island with this, find a professional. Find somebody that is qualified, find somebody that has integrity, find somebody that, in my opinion, should hopefully be a fiduciary, fee only, somebody that can work with you if you do not know what you're doing or you feel like you don't know what resources to go seek out. Education is a very big starting point. Get educated so you know what you're doing, or at the very least, you know who to talk to and how to understand who you can trust. Once more, I'm Curtis Crossland of Subtle Crossland Wealth Advisors, and if you want to see how we help folks build a more tax-focused and efficient retirement, be sure to check us out at subtlecrossland.com and subscribe for future videos.